Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a top 5. Now, I did this for the top 5 ways to save Coronation Street, and I did this for the top 5 failures of the Chris Glenshaw era. And today I think we're going to share some of the love with Hollyoaks in a way, but also in the opposite way. These are going to be my top 5 ways to save Hollyoaks. So, why am I saying this about Hollyoaks? Because, fundamentally, Hollyoaks is in a bit of a weird place right now, where I do genuinely believe that Hollyoaks is somewhat getting better. It's just Hollyoaks has had a pretty bad kind of circumstances, right? Where Hollyoaks was doing really well in 2024, and then Channel 4 decided that Hollyoaks needed to get taken down a notch after a fairly successful start to the year. And overall, a fairly decent year, starting to build up on a lot of momentum with the Isabel Smith stuff and, you know, all that sort of stuff. It was starting to get good, and then they went, yeah. We are cutting down the time of the show to 1 hour, and we're going to be axing a whole load of the cast and the crew, and you guys just have to make do with it. It was a really bitter pill to swallow as a Hollyoaks fan, because it's the reminder that not all soaps are going to be on forever. And at some point, one of these shows are going to be next. I've been pretty vocal by saying I do believe that Hollyoaks will be next in terms of getting axed, but unfortunately, we don't really know when. But at least for now, we do have the 30th anniversary that Hollyoaks will definitely survive beyond. But how far beyond, that is the question that starts to make a lot of us Hollyoaks fans fairly uneasy. So why a top 5? Well, I think Hollyoaks has been good, because I think it has been good in a sense. It is sorely lacking in some way. In order to accommodate the new time thing, we did a time jump, but we also had to get rid of a lot of members of cast, which in turn meant that a lot of the cast that we come to expect to rely on and come to believe in were unfortunately taken away from us, probably in a very cruel and very unkind way, which means that a lot of the characters that we've gotten used to and built up for a while, now they're gone. So it meant that now we've got to get on board with a whole new set of cast and a whole different set of cast, and now believe that this cast is the one that is going to save the show. It's a very hard position to be in, especially considering it always feels like no matter what, Channel 4, if the money dries up, it will inevitably just start chopping off limbs again. So this is going to be my top 5 ways to save Hollyoaks. Now, admittedly, I will say this one's a little bit less cocked than my Coronation Street one. I had a lot of really solid ideas for that one. For this one, I don't have as many huge bold ideas, just a lot of general kind of here's the minor things I would change to make it better. So if you have ideas as to what you'd want to see me do in top 5s or see me do instead of the stuff I suggest, tell me in the comment section. And as always, for these videos, there will be timestamps, so you can hop around to each and every timestamp. But I say that for now, it is now time to go on to number 5. But first, I'm Ash from Watching Walford, and these are my top 5 ways to save Hollyoaks. And so for number 5, well, this one's more of a behind-the-scenes things. This one is just for the showrunners and hopefully Channel 4. This is for you to actually take note and realize that a lot of your prominent cast members have made it pretty open to suggest they felt like they've been on the chopping block too. So for number 5 for me, I think that Channel 4 and the Hollyoaks bosses, they need to add some more stability to Hollyoaks. So they need to extend the contracts of the regulars and actually instill this sense of belief in the future. Because the weird thing with Hollyoaks right now is it does have a lot of these characters that you did decide to keep, but with a bunch of cast that you keep returning and keep coming back on retainer, you keep sending mixed messages out there. You bring back Tom Cunningham, for example, and Warren Fox, but you'd leave out Cindy Cunningham, for example. It's kind of a weird scenario where you want to have the history, but also you had to axe a lot of the history, so you're just going to keep them hanging. But we've had so many interviews where, Ashley Taylor Dawson, Jessica Fox, they the characters who have, I don't know if this is out yet, but, you know, have won Best Family at the Soap Awards, even they are starting to question how much they really believe, how much they actually want to, like, stay there. A lot of these characters and actors do want to stay at Hollyoaks, but unfortunately, if you just can't make them feel stable and add some stability to it, you're just going to create a bit of a uneasy work environment, and nobody's going to do their best work. So, for top 5, I simply suggest you need to give some stability to these actors. A lot of them have put their life into the show. And you did lose a lot of goodwill by axing so many fan favorites and axing so many characters who could have been Hollyoaks stars of the future, but unfortunately they didn't fit into this timeline of the show, so unfortunately they had to be killed. Like Dilly, like Ethan, like James, like Cindy. Well, Cindy wasn't killed, but, you know, still was axed. These characters who should and could have been the possible future of Hollyoaks were unfortunately just demolished because ultimately you needed to fit a certain like wage requirement in a sense, but you didn't do it. So it's a really irresponsible way to manage a show. And like, this doesn't happen with the other shows. You don't look at EastEnders and Coronation Street. You very rarely get the cast who go, yeah, I thought this one was the one. Like, I thought this one was me being out. Like, you do have the story with the Craig Tinker actor Colson Smith who went, yeah, this is probably it for me. But like, fundamentally, you need to remind the cast that you have stuck with, that you are invested in them, and you genuinely want to bring them ahead of time in a way to move Hollyoaks forward. So, yeah, it's just a weird one, just a little small one, and I think this is an important thing. You just need to extend an olive branch to a bunch of characters who you had to cruelly cut. You need to, like, you know, mend the bridges and say, look, Ashley Taylor Dawson, look, Jessica Fox, look, Mercedes McQueen, look, Cleo, look, these characters who we are inherently building around, we do actually see a future ahead for you. So, you know, not to worry, here's a contract till, obviously I know it's out of their hands in a sense. Like, you can't guarantee that Channel 4 won't just axe Hollyoaks outright. Like, in my brain, the way Channel 4 looks at Hollyoaks is, if it does really well at the 30th anniversary, maybe we'll keep it for another year. But if it has a pretty mediocre 30th anniversary, I do think that Channel 4 will start to keep slashing at Hollyoaks and seeing how much it can take away without the show getting dramatically worse. And I don't know how much more they could take from Channel 4 before they get axed. But once again, that is purely speculation. So, number 5, add some stability to the cast. Remind them that they are the ones you chose for the future and you actually want to build around them. And now time for number 4. And now time for number 4. And this one's more of a storyline thing, so it is a bit more to wax lyrical about it. It will be very on brand as to what I've been complaining about with Hollyoaks right now. And I think there is a sorely lacking bit of spark to the show. Because if you take the teen exploitation storyline, for the young teens, you have 3 very prominent characters who have been a key figure point for the show, and on the side you have Vicky, you have Frankie, and you have Dylan, and obviously with Dylan you have Lucas. So you have 4 big prominent teen characters. Where do the Roscoes fit into that equation? The answer's not really. You have the Blacks, you have Grace Black, you have Rex, and you have Claire Devine now. You have that family. You have the McQueens. You have like Tony, Diane, Roe. You have the Lomaxes. You have the Hayes. You have that sort of family. But my big problem right now in Hollyoaks and in general is the Roscoes do not work anymore. And I don't want to beat this drum too hard because I've already talked about it quite prominently. And also Freddie is confirmed to leave, and I kind of predict that Robbie will also be on the way. It was an experiment that didn't necessarily work, because when you bring back Freddie, and the weird thing with Freddie is a character who is perpetually 22, essentially. He is a cheeky, chappy ladies' man who can't stop getting himself in a sticky situation. Now that's somewhat redeemable if you're a good man and you're in your 20s, but if you're like pushing your 40s and you're still doing it, there's a degree of Freddy that doesn't really work in this new version of Hollyoaks. Freddy shouldn't really work 10 years on because you are supposed to make the character more adult, but also, does Charlie Clapham actually have the range to do that? I don't necessarily know if he does. And even Robbie as well, where you bring back Robbie and you go, oh, you know, he's had a bit of a rough time since he left, but he's become a bit more of a criminal, become a bit more of a gangster. Like, okay, the issue with Robbie was he was never really, he would always be involved in dodgy stuff, but he would never really be the head of anything. But then they make Robbie the one to kill Blue, the prolific, like, gangster, and, like, Warren's a big rival of Warren's, and then you kind of make him take over as Blue. But that, too, didn't make any sense, because that's just not the mold that you put Robbie in. Robbie is... You put Warren in that role because Warren is physically intimidating and is actually menacing. You put Trevor Royal in that situation because he is menacing and he is actually scary. You put Robbie in there, he's a bit like he's like a little cuddly bear. You know what I mean? He doesn't really fill that mold. He doesn't really instill fear in the hearts. All he really had is like, yeah, well, I killed Blue, didn't I? Like, well, yeah, great. And then he gets wrapped up with Freddy and then he gets wrapped up with Grace and Claire, and now he's, in my brain, he's probably going to die or be dead by the time this is released. This should be out on Wednesday, so Wednesday, this is being recorded Monday 2nd, so he will likely be dead, as they have implied that somebody else will die in this week, probably from sepsis. So if that's right, cool. If that's wrong, fair enough. And so I have the simple way to fix the Roscoes then, because in my brain, you either need the Roscoes to leave, which is happening with Freddy going and Robbie perhaps going as well. You do what you did 10 years ago. You unite the Roscoes with the Cunninghams. Now, what do I mean by that? Back in Hollyoaks 2015, 2016, you obviously had the Roscoes, who was kind of a very much larger family with Ziggy, with Joe. Any other Roscoes? You know, you had all the Roscoes together. You had the two olders and the two young ones. Then you had Robbie, and then you had Jason. Now, Jason was with Holly Cunningham, who was Cindy's daughter. And they had this relationship. And then when Robbie and Jason and Holly left, they all decided to leave the show together to raise Lexi, I think. Did they raise Lexi or did they raise someone else? I don't remember. Whatever. They left anyways, and they were never seen again. Now, but at the same time, with this connection with Holly, you also had the Roscoes kind of dealing with Cindy a decent chunk, and you had them kind of deal with Dirk as well, who had this kind of weird blended family because of this. And why do I say this? Simply because out of all the names that were kept, Cindy is probably the largest and harshest axe on the list. She is a character who spent and dedicated her life to being on Hollyoaks, and she would have been a Hollyoaks for lifer had this awkward set of circumstances not propped up. Fundamentally, Cindy is Hollyoaks, and she is important to the fabric of the being. She is so versatile and she is so together, and the only reason she was axed is basically because the writers decided they didn't like her for some reason. Like, she had the big stuff with Luke, where Luke was dying with, I think it was I don't remember, but was it M&D? Was it just early onset out like dementia? Whatever, don't matter. Point being, he died, and this was Cindy's big storyline that kept her there. And she had a family, she had Ollie, she kind of had Phoenix in a sense, but then at that point, where that all left and that all wrapped up, then you leave Cindy by herself again. She doesn't really interact with Tom because Tom's like an honorary Malik. So you don't really have Cindy and Tom like siblings together. You don't really have them together. and you don't really have, and you don't bring in any more family around her because Holly's not coming back. So ultimately, this leaves Cindy on an island by herself. And that, in my opinion, is the only reason why she was cut, was because they refused to actually develop her family beyond a certain point. So then you had that weird family of Grace, Zara, and Cindy, but it didn't really work. Then you had Dave, but Dave was dying as well. So now you don't even have like the Chen Williams to be Cindy's extended family because all of them are gone. So at this point, Cindy is one of the only characters without any actual family to support her. Because if you're smart in soaps, you typically build families around for stories to happen in. Therefore, when the stories happen to said characters, you have the people to bounce off of and tell more stories about. Like the Osbournes, like the Frankie storyline wouldn't have been so good if they didn't have this really interesting dynamic with Frankie and Darren, Frankie and Nancy, Frankie and Charlie, Frankie and Oscar, etc., etc. Like Suzanne and the rest of the Osbourne. It was a really important piece of the puzzle because otherwise it would have just been a very like damp storyline, because who would have reacted to Frankie's struggling? No one. And so this is something they always refuse to do with Cindy. They refuse to give her more family. Because yes, a lot of her family were dead at the hands of Milo. So I recognize the desire. I recognize and understand why they wanted and felt they had to do this. But at the same time, you do shoot yourself in the foot, because it's that weird thing where it's like in soap at the minute where they tease a lot of relationships but never actually let them happen. And then people get axed because they never actually develop this relationship. If you just let them be in the relationship and develop it on screen, they would probably have a much more prominent position in the pedestal. But because you refuse to do something with it, you want them to be there, but you don't want to do anything with them, which means you feel a bit more comfortable pushing them to the back of the shelf, or just outright taking them out and shoving them into the bin. But genuinely, at the end of the day, I don't think Steph Waring will save Hollyoaks. I don't. But you need to bring back some of the goodwill of the fans who were a bit scorned over the time jump, and the way you do that is by having the familiar faces and having the prominent characters come back, and Cindy is fantastic. I'd also probably bring back Leah Barnes, just because, you know, history, and just generally, like, you can do whatever else you want with it, but what you really need to do is you need to bring back Cindy. You need to bring back that goodwill for the fans, and you just need to stop messing around with this kind of Roscoe experiment, because it has failed, and maybe it's even over before this video is even ended. You know what I mean? So, or alternatively, you just bring a new family in, because every other family has a really important part to play in Hollyoaks at this point in time, except for the Roscoes, who are on their way out. So you either need a new family, or you kind of re-establish the Cunninghams, a pillar of the community, a pillar of like everything. And, you know, even then you can still have like Cindy and Darren, you can still have like Cindy and Tony, you can still have stuff like this, and you can generally just keep, you know, you keep people interested, and you actually invest in a new family for the future. So, but yeah, and I don't know what I'd want for a new family, but something. You just need something. You need someone new, you need something without it. Honestly, if we're going for like weird wish list things, I'd bring back Kim Butterfield. I just love the character, she was great. Or Esther, just anyone really. Like the reintroductions were cool, like Dodger being back is pretty sick. And they have generally knocked it out of the park with a lot of the returns, but still, it's just kind of a weird time for it. But I do genuinely believe that if they brought back Cindy, and you brought back the Cunninghams, and you bring back Ollie, maybe you bring back Jason, or maybe you just kind of have a new set of family, like she settled down with someone else after all this time, here's the new family, boom. Then I think we're cooking with gas, and we have another character who you can easily rely on to actually give serious material. So, yeah, there we are. So number 4 is replace the Roscoes with a new family, or bring back Cindy with the Cunninghams and bring Cindy back at the helm. So yeah, that is number 4. As for number 3, this one is kind of a weird little in the middle one. It was one thing that we kind of discussed about a while ago, but the weird thing with Hollyoaks is Hollyoaks has strokes of genius, but it's also surrounded by a bunch of shit. Like, you have this teenage exploitation storyline, which is really interesting. And then you have Tommy Odenkirk dressing like a fucking Reaper. And it's like, yeah, I don't really know about this one, lads. I don't really know what to think about this one and what to feel. It was like when you had the Frankie storyline kicking off, and then you had it continuing, then you had it really ascending. And then you had Jeremy Blake returning as, he's not Patrick, he's actually worse, he's now a serial killer. What? Like, this is what you brought him back to do? And, like, I think that's just a little kind of short-sighted kind of opinion. Just, like, stop cluttering the good with the bad. Stop ruining all of the really, really rich and solid material. Like, you don't... If you buy a really, really fancy bottle of rum, you're not putting it with the 30p Asda's own Coke. You know, you're really kind of savouring it with some proper good, like, drink to go with it. And that's kind of what they struggle to do within Hollyoaks, is they have this really big, prominent storyline, but because not all of it can be that big storyline, they just kind of fill the gaps with a bunch of, like, shit. It's like drywall, but they've not actually covered up any of the holes. They've just, like, plastered over it. So ultimately, the hole's still there. It's just hidden for now and will come up to... Oh, it will come up for air at some point in time. And then it kind of comes to the other bit, where the pacing of Hollyoaks is really weird. Because it is only 1 hour now, when they were talking about how this cut was actually going to be a good thing, they kind of made it... They kind of angled that we'd spend more time with our characters in the week. And I don't really know if that's manifested in the way that they kind of wanted. Because they kind of... It's very bizarre. Because they said, oh, look, you know, be different with the cameras and it'll be really cool and cinematic. We'll spend more time with them. But then you proceed to pretty much just do what you were doing before. But there's 1 hour less of it. Like, are we at the point where this current Hollyoaks team can't manage 2 hours? And I know it's not their fault that it got cut and they had to make do with what they had. But fundamentally, the pacing has... But the weird thing with Hollyoaks is Hollyoaks' pacing has always been like doubled speed. But also, some weeks it feels like nothing happened. And with Hollyoaks, you always typically had, like, going from shot to shot, scene to scene, moment to moment. Like, boom, boom, boom. Everything really large and out there and consistent. But you kind of just fart around sometimes, and maybe there will be something really dramatic happen. So I do think the pacing of Hollyoaks has gotten a little bit cluttered through time. And I get that they have less, like, team to work with, and they have less money, and they have less, like, department. So, ultimately, it is going to be harder to pump out 1 hour of scenes a week. But, like, at the end of the day, it just makes it feel both rushed and both really slowed down. Sometimes with Hollyoaks, it feels like, you know when during the pandemic that most of the shows that still had episodes coming out, they just slowed it down and released less. Well, you know how Coronation Street was absolutely fucking miserable at the time because we had the really strong Yasmin and Jeff storyline, but it was all about the court stuff and it went on for about 4 more months than it should have. And then you had Leanne tragically losing baby Oliver, which mostly just amounted to her fucking screaming at literally everyone every episode for like 6 months. Like, the pacing was both really good and really strong, but at least in that case, you could have explained it away by saying, oh, we can't film anymore, so we're just extending the episodes. Now it's just like, are we moving forward or are we going backwards? So, yeah, number 3 is simply just figure out the pacing, just find a nice little sweet spot, and stop cluttering the good with the bad. You don't have the Tommy stuff go like perpendicular to the Frankie Oswald. I get that you want to have differences and you want to have the funny stuff and you have the silly stuff, but fundamentally, if you're having something really good like the Frankie stuff, and then you clutter it with here is Jez, he is like Patrick, but he's a gardener and gay. It's like, or bi. It's like, just stop. You know, people tend to overcomplicate things. Where it's like, do you want dessert? You can have a chocolate and pistachio and cream and cookie pie. And it's like, can I just have one of them? One of them will be good by itself, but like adding all of this shit is too much and you're just kind of overcomplicating it for the sake of trying to be fancy. Don't know if that actually makes any sense. But yeah, that is number 3. And number 2 is this one is kind of more of a vibes kind of thing, but it's still in the same way. The issue with Hollyoaks is it had to make a lot of very quick decisions and a lot of quick choices in order to accommodate what they had to do, trying to accommodate a lot of really harsh things to adjust to this new sense of this is what the show's going to be like now, this is what we have to deal with. But alternatively, it meant that they had to find a way to kill off or get rid of like 30 members of CAT, which is a really big struggle because you have to find an interesting story for all of these people to leave the show in a way that both makes sense and a way that will both possibly do justice for the character. But in the same way, this iteration of Hollyoaks, for some reason, feels like they get a cool idea, and instead of figuring out how it would work historically, they just kind of clutter it together and just ham-fist it in. And the best example of this currently is probably the Blakes, where Jez is Jeremy's distant twin brother who, he also hated Patrick, but now you are bringing back Jeremy. You're bringing back the actor to play the same character but different, but you're kind of bringing it back from the dead, so it just convolutes them. But the point being that they need to stop making reckless, short-sighted decisions to fit new ideas. And this can kind of also go down with Claire Devine in a way, because as much as I am excited to see what she does and how they play her, ultimately you did unkill a character who was formerly dead. And you've had to make a lot of leaps and bounds in order to get to the point where you go, no, this is really smart in the way they brought her back from the dead, and this is what role she's going to play. Now, admittedly, most villains in soaps never truly die, and they will inevitably be brought back if the time is right. But in the same way, you create a really kind of hard time of you want to keep, every producer has that set of characters or that character that they would love to have worked with, but unfortunately you couldn't have done it because the character was dead on the show. Like EastEnders famously had it with like Tony Jordan in the 90s. Like, why the fuck have I not been able to write a story about Dirty Dan? And that kind of makes it really sad because you go, I would love to write for this character, but you don't really want to change everything to do it. And so therefore now you have to find a way to bring back Dirty Den, which they did inevitably do. And that still brought a bit of ire. But the issue with Hollyoaks is it does it a little bit too frequently. Like, Hollyoaks loves to bring a character back from the dead if they can just make an excuse for it. Excuse me. And this doesn't even extend to bring back characters from the dead. I think a lot of it has been a lot of very short-sighted decisions of characters who probably didn't need to kill off. Like, I can just think of about 4 characters of just this last period that you really shouldn't have killed off and you had no real right to do that. Juliet Nightingale. a character who was a genuine bona fide talent, and as much as her writing was kind of shoddy at the best of times, ultimately had potential to eventually become a truly great Hollyoaks character if she actually was dedicated to the project. But unfortunately, like, they really aged her up and really gave her more story and really rebuilt up the Nightingales, only to just have Juliet die in what was a fairly quick-winded, fairly kind of still a very nice poetic ending for Juliet. But also, you didn't really need to kill the character off because she had so much more potential to grow. And this can be said for Ethan Williams, where they said, Ethan's not dying, he's not being killed off screen, he's being kept after the time jump. Oh, and he's dead on the bonnet of a car, and now Sienna is with Cleo now. And it's like, Ethan was a fan favorite, a character who would have happily stayed in Hollyoaks for life, but now you've ripped that opportunity away, and the whole point is Sienna may have been the one to kill him. It's a disservice to the character, and it's a disservice to an actor who did give everything to really try and become a proper Hollyoaks character, and had so many good and rich scenes and so many cool ways to really make up for the lack of direction or the lack of character. And, you know, that was a short-sighted one that really did alienate a bunch of people. The one character that's always stuck out to me was Nico, that they killed off for reasons, and they brought her back, and then they killed her off again. I still mourn the loss of that character fundamentally, but that wasn't who I was going to mention. I was going to mention James Nightingale, who also should not have been killed off, because, I mean, he's the only actor since Justin Burton. I forgot the actor's name, like Chris Fountain or whoever his name was. He's the only actor since him who has brought Hollyoaks a best actor award in years. He genuinely was a talented and huge asset to the show and would have stayed. But unfortunately, he was killed off. And through time, I've become a lot more kind of open to James. I didn't really understand the character that much, but I did at least appreciate what he brought. And it's just a dying shame that now the chances for James to be brought back inevitably is forever gone, simply because the Nightingales didn't fit into their image of the show. It's just kind of, and like, I'm pretty sure I had another example that I could pull off on the top of my head as a character who I don't believe should have been killed off senselessly. But it's just it's another decision that really kind of hampered a lot of people's enjoyment of the show, and it just typically hurt the way that now it's just the thing with soap is you don't want to kill off a character before it's like overdone. You want to kill off a character when it's the peak time and the maximum amount of outreach, and people will genuinely be upset with the death. But it felt like none of these characters actually reached that position. None of these characters actually fully established and asserted themselves as a true gem, but they weren't necessarily allowed to. So now you've just wasted like 4 years. Now you just wasted the time of these characters. And I don't know like how to feel. Like, I don't feel like James, Juliet. I don't feel like Ethan. Don't feel like, I suppose, Nico, since I'm putting her in this conversation. I know I forgot a name that I wanted to actually mention, but like, you took these characters, you stripped them away, and you just kind of decided now they don't fit into the mold. So like, and one of these days, you are going to run out of talent that you keep establishing, because people either aren't going to want to stay because you know that maybe you're just perpetually worried about getting killed off, or you just don't stay in Hollyoaks because you know that maybe it's not going to be around in 5 years. Why would you spend your time kind of establishing yourself as a Hollyoaks star when Hollyoaks stock may be worth absolutely zero in a year's time? It's a hard position to be in, and it's relentless in how it did it, because they had to make a lot of bold choices. And I still don't inherently blame Hannah Cheers and the team, but I still blame Channel 4 for simply just ruining a show that's given it so much success and so much attention. I'd argue that that's one of the key reasons why Channel 4 is still prominent to this day, that and their 743 different reruns of The Big Bang Theory. Or The Simpsons. But yeah, it's a sad thing, and you don't want to get into a mold of just killing off people for shock effect, which obviously Hollyoaks has done a bad thing, has like kept the thing up and doing so, but like, you don't, if Darren would have been in his fledgling years and he wouldn't have become established, there's a high chance that Darren, if he wasn't established and he was a young character here, would have just been killed off, and we never would have had Darren Osborne, never would have had Nancy, never would have had Tony, Cindy, all these characters who have become true Hollyoaks greats you would never have had because you simply just didn't fit in the plans at the minute. And instead of just sending them away, you've had to have them be killed off because you want it to be entertaining. Like Ella as well, who I didn't really think was great, but at least she had a lot of potential to become something better, especially with her pedigree. So at the end of the day, these decisions, you just have to hope that they won't come back to bite Hollyoaks, because there's only so much room that you can give yourself, especially if you keep axing a bunch of the favorites, a bunch of the people that are beloved. And at some point, maybe you won't be able to make as many stars as you used to, and then you'll be wanting to look back at people from yesteryears and actually have them come back to reunite a bit of the curse. Like, at some point, you're not gonna make a strong character. And at that point, you're gonna have to look back to people of the past. But if they're all fucking dead, well, you're shit out of luck, because, the previous writers, the previous producers have, given you just enough room to hang yourself in a video game, hypothetically speaking. You cheat. Yeah, it's just a sad one. But that is number 2. And now, finally, number 1. Number 1 is a big kind of deal for this. Number 1 is a fairly large and sizable thing, but it's a bit of the old copium. It's a bit of the old let's just pray and hope it gets better. The one simple way to fix Hollyoaks is you somehow convince Channel 4 or another company to fully buy into the show and stop fucking gutting it. That's my simple thing for number 1. You have got to admit that Channel 4 has supported Hollyoaks through the good and the bad, and there have been a good couple of bad years for Hollyoaks. But also, at this point, Channel 4 is starting to take more and more away from Hollyoaks. And at some point, there's only so much you can withstand. At some point, there's only so much, and I'm sure at some point soon, there will be a day where Hollyoaks is told, we're not needed anymore. We need to commission more series of Young Sheldon. It's a joke. But you just need to keep everything moving forward. And what would genuinely save Hollyoaks is if you could somehow invent a time where you bring it back to 5 to 6 episodes a week and actually have the larger cast again. Now, you don't need to just renew the cast as to what it was, because a lot of them are gone. A lot of people are kind of reduced. But if you could at least reassert some of the star power, bring back some of the favorites, kind of re-emerge, just make a lot of families a lot larger, it would generally do a good thing. But the main issue is this new writing team really ready and willing to do this? I'm not sure they are. And I know it's a big bold thing, but I do genuinely believe that if there were more Hollyoaks out there, the timing and the pacing would be much better. And if there were more episodes a week, the timing and the pacing would be much better. And if they actually had the luxury of knowing we do have 5 to 6 episodes a week, we can actually begin to really stamp our feet and really do what our vision is without having to worry about being axed. I'm sure it's not entirely a fun place to be at Channel 4. That's surely not a happy place to be, where a lot of the actors are feeling the cosh. A lot of the writers and producers are worrying about the future. But at the end of the day, if Channel 4 just decides it can't go bust, and you do hear all the rumors of Channel 4 kind of struggling to actually produce what it needs to, it's never make enough money, it's always under financial stress. You always hear all the articles just never stop that Channel 4 might be going under. So at that point in time, the best thing to happen to Hollyoaks is to be bought off by the BBC. I highly doubt ITV would do it, but the best bet would to be put Hollyoaks on BBC, have it compete against Emmerdale on ITV, and then raise up Hollyoaks' stock and give it a much more prominent platform with better advertising and better direction and better producers. Because admittedly, you know how EastEnders and Emmerdale and Corrie, they often share producers. Hollyoaks is kind of alone on itself, where it's no longer seen as a big show, but having a bigger platform and having more outreach and a thing that actually believes and wants to help Hollyoaks would benefit it much better. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do when you have a really good thing going and your boss keeps saying, yeah, good work, but we have to change things. And at some point, you're just going to be fed up of it. That's no pressure to put anybody under. So fundamentally, if it could go back to 5 to 6 episodes a week, and it could once again have a larger cast and a lot more filming going on, that would be the best case scenario. Whether it is with Channel 4 or whether it is with the BBC, speculation, whether it is with another broadcasting company who will actually invest in the future, and a company that actually has a long-term pedigree of actually sticking around, why I'm picking the ITVs, the BBCs, because at some point you just have to acknowledge that Channel 4 will continue to cut and cut and cut until Hollyoaks has nothing left. And when it has nothing left, most of the actors will probably be poached by other soaps or be doomed to being a media reality TV kind of star. So it is an institution. Hollyoaks is a huge piece of British culture. Some people know it as the show that's on after Simpsons or before Simpsons. I don't remember which one. But fundamentally, the soap world is a lot darker without Hollyoaks in it. So I think at some point soon, Hollyoaks truly realizes, and Channel 4 truly realizes, that if you cannot buy legacy in TV, you cannot buy prestige, you cannot buy legacy. You can try, like Amazon did, but fundamentally, you have to realize who cashes your checks. And Channel 4's biggest property is Hollyoaks, and they need to respect it like the, prize cow it is. They need to appreciate it for what it is, or one day it may be gone and they'll only have themselves to blame for it. But there we are. What do you think about my top 5 list? My throat got increasingly more raspy ahead of this one, so I hope you enjoyed it. It's not as kind of long or extensive as my previous one. I probably didn't have as good ideas as how to fix it, but still, it's always good to have another voice out there kind of explaining what I think would be better for the show. And I'd love to see what you guys say in the comment section about what you think about what my opinion and what I would do to save Hollyoaks, and what would you do to save Hollyoaks? Tell me in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye. Bye.